Welcome to the Pint Glass Football Podcast.
Pint Glass Football. I'm your host, Brad Fowler. What's up, PGF Nation? It's officially over for some teams in the NFL. Cowboys fans, cover your ears. We also have some surprising NFL teams that we'll decide if they're for real or not. And the college football playoff is starting to come into focus. We'll tell you who we think gets in. But joining me, of course, my co-host, Alex Higdon. Alex, what is going on?
Brad, what a a bunch of 1 o'clock games that we had from this past Sunday to culminate what we got in the 4 o'clock games, specifically that Washington and Chicago matchup.
Yeah, unbelievable. The early slate Sunday was crazy. 6 of the 8 games were decided by fewer than 6 points. We had game-winning scores in the final minute of Patriots, Jets, Dolphins, Cardinals, Browns, Ravens. We'll jump into some of these games, of course. But look, I want to start right off the top here because we teased it there in the intro. The Dallas Cowboys. Now, love them or hate them, Alex, we got to talk about them because the Cowboys are who we thought they were.
Or who we thought they were.
And when I say who we thought they were, it's because we predicted that this would be the season where we start to see this franchise slide. 30-24 loss to the 49ers. This game, really, it was a lot more one-sided than the final score would suggest. The Cowboys defense, look, they're just bad. There's no way around it. Their run game is bad. Dak Prescott's been bad. 2 more terrible picks in this game. He's on pace, Alex, to have a career high in interceptions this year. And after 8 weeks, I think it's safe to say that the Cowboys don't look anything like a contender. And once again, this is why we said this offseason, they shouldn't sign Dak to a big extension. He's not good enough to carry an average roster. All of the team's current problems, I think, can really be traced back to those questionable decisions in the offseason by Jerry Jones and this management. In the playoffs, quite frankly, Alex, I think they look like a long shot right now for Dallas.
Absolutely, Brad. I mean, number one, we could start and end the conversation with you didn't sign Derrick Henry, who wanted to come to your team. Nor did you draft a running back. Right, so let's start there. So you weakened yourself there. We know that they have injuries at both rush edge positions and Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. We know that they're both out. And people will take a look at this game and say, oh, but it looked like it was a close game. It was 6 point. No, it wasn't a close game. And sorry, Cowboy fans, we talked about this, and I even projected out with your salary cap and what you should be talking about. In what you should be doing in the offseason. You've already doubled down on Dak. You've already doubled down on CD. And I'm just going to follow your resume. You're probably going to double down on Micah and just be the same team and blame it all on the coach and hate Dak the way you hated Romo for not being what Aikman was. Simple. So I don't really have much to say. On the other side, real quick, San Francisco, they needed that win. They're looking to really, truly turn it around. And the only thing, I have one thing from a fantasy standpoint, and it's a fantasy alert. If you haven't picked up Isaac Guerrero, go put in your waiver claims now or get that kid up, depending on how your waiver wire is set up, because Kyle Shanahan has now seriously had to get this kid the ball a lot more.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I think he's a guy that I might have overlooked a little bit during the NFL draft process. And we had a good friend of ours that was really pounding the table for this kid and told me, I got to go watch tape on him. He's a really good player at Louisville. You got to watch this kid. And I did watch some of his tape, and he kind of brought this kid to my attention. And I remember thinking, yeah, he looks like a pretty good player. I didn't think he'd be this good. And he's been really impressive to them, and another great late round selection for the 49ers. It's unbelievable. They just always seem to hit on these mid and late round picks. We talked about these early slate games. We had some amazing games. How about Jameis Winston, 38-yard game winner? Kyle Hamilton drops the interception. That snapped a 5-game winning streak for the Ravens. That was a shocking game. Jordan Love leaves the game for Green Bay with a groin injury. Malik Willis comes in, leads a game-winning drive, which, by the way, how good has that been? Malik Willis, they give up on this kid, really didn't even give him much of a chance in Tennessee. He's the backup in Green Bay, and all he's done is come in big moments and play some really good football.
too. I like the way the kid looked. Hopefully it starts to progress a little bit more and we see what we can get from him in the future.
Yeah, and look, maybe he's not a starter in this league, but I think it just goes to show like how good LaFleur and this organization is when it comes to the quarterback position. The rest of the league needs to take notes on what Green Bay is doing historically and currently with quarterbacks, because they have really made it work. It seems like all they do is hit on this position, develop this position, and do just such an incredible job. And look, he's probably going to end up having some trade value, and that'll be interesting to see if he does get another shot. But speaking of young quarterbacks, Alex, how about that Hail Mary win for the Commanders? That was crazy. I thought Twitter was going to explode. Look, they led most of the game, and this wasn't the most exciting game from an offensive standpoint. If you just looked at the box score, Jaden Daniels, you could say, outplayed Caleb Williams for pretty much most of the game, even though I didn't think either one of these guys was necessarily great. But in the fourth quarter, Jaden Daniels really couldn't put a scoring drive together and put that game away, and they had multiple opportunities to do so. Caleb Williams, on the other hand, really heated up when it mattered most in this game, and that's what I was most impressed with. Led the Bears on what should have been the game-winning drive. He had another drive late before Chicago decided to hand it off on the goal line to an offensive lineman, like it's the Super Bowl shuffle and they're going to the fridge. I don't know what that was. That was a terrible play call. Of course, the guy fumbles it, and it made me think... It made me think that in that moment, Alex, we almost need to bring the WTF moment of the week back, that segment we did last year, because it was so ridiculous. But Jaden Daniels, I think at this point, is running away with Rookie of the Year. I think we know that. But bigger picture here, I think both these franchises should be really excited about these young rookie quarterbacks.
Yeah, absolutely. From everything that I've seen from both quarterbacks, I mean, it started out rocky. Rocky with Caleb because he was really just trying to go for every single big play versus Jane Daniels, who came in and showed a lot of poise immediately. Shane Waldron calling the refrigerator Perry play from the '85 Super Bowl was ridiculous in a game like this. You really hadn't been able to put anything together all for the entire game. You finally get Caleb. He drives you down the field. And instead of just giving it to Swift, who cracked one earlier in the game, instead of giving it to Swift or even Roschon Johnson, which would have killed me in fantasy, but even Roschon Johnson, to just drive it in and reward those big guys up front who've been getting killed for most of the season, score the game. If they do that, this is a 22-18 game, even if Jane Daniels hits the Hail Mary.
It really was ridiculous. There's nothing I hate more, especially in the red zone or near the goal line, when offensive coordinators get cute and they try to get overly creative, and it's almost like they outthink themselves with some of these play calls. You're at the goal line. Just run the damn football. Or how about a play-action pass with your athletic young quarterback? Let him roll out and make a decision whether to run or throw it. Anything but what they ran. I would have been happy with almost any play call but that. It was terrible. How about the Buffalo Bills, Alex? Now, this team is sitting at 6-2. I think it's safe to say, I think they're going to roll to another AFC East title. Dolphins season ended on Sunday. Look, they couldn't survive the Tua injury. Jets season just ended. I think it's over for them too. The Aaron Rodgers experiment clearly hasn't worked. They had to win these last 2 weeks, but they really had to win on Sunday if they had any chance to really climb back into this race. Losing to the Patriots, I think, just put the nail in the coffin for this team. And we thought the AFC East, a lot of people, and I think ourselves included here, thought this could be a really competitive division. And I think a lot of people thought that there was multiple teams that could win this, but it's looking more and more like Buffalo is going to run away with it. And it's happening, Alex, in a quote-unquote rebuilding year. They aren't just winning, they're blowing teams out right now. This was the Bills' fourth win by 20 or more points this season. Josh Allen is really playing the best football of his career so far. 14 touchdowns through his first pick of the year on Sunday. This team is really starting to put it together.
And here we go. People love to say that we don't disagree. Here we're going to disagree again. I'm not impressed with you, Bills. Sorry. You beat the Cardinals soft. You beat the Dolphins soft. You beat the Jaguars soft. You lost the two real teams in the Ravens as well as the Texans. Jets, we know we did pick them. We thought they were going to have a turnaround, but they are in the crapper. By the time you played them, we already knew they were in the crapper soft. Titans, soft. Seahawks, soft. So once again, if we're gonna be fair here and do what we do with the Cowboys and say, hey, Dak doesn't ever beat any above 500 teams. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. I'm keeping the same energy with the Bills. You've beat nobody. I'm not impressed with you. I'm happy that you've been able to beat these soft teams, but I'm a Bill Parcells fan, my favorite coach all time. You play who's on your schedule, and that's what you're doing. So let's see. What do you have coming up? You have the Dolphins next. You have the Colts. You have the Colts after that. So you get to build up a nice cushy lead, and then you face the Chiefs, 49ers, and by that time, depending on Cooper Kupp is still there with the Rams, you have the Rams, the Lions. That stretch, though, that 4-game stretch, I'll know who you are by the end of that 4-game stretch. Until then, I'm just not paying attention to you because you're not worth my time.
Wow. I get what you're saying, and I know you've been picking against this team for years, and it's backfired in your face here, but 6-2 is 6-2, and I get what you're saying. Some of these teams haven't been the best competition, but they're blowing teams out, and they're crushing teams and playing high-level football. So if these were close wins or they were squeaking by some of these quote-unquote lower-level teams, maybe I can see what you're saying, but they've been dominant. Another team that I've been impressed with, Alex, is Atlanta. They're 5-3. They're a game in front of Tampa Bay in the division. They just beat Tampa Bay again, so they've now swept the Buccaneers, and they've got the head-to-head tiebreaker clinched against Tampa Bay. So this was a huge win here. Kirk Cousins, I think it's safe to say, Alex, he's been the quarterback that they were looking for. He's really stabilized this position. It was the big missing piece to this offense. He is lighting it up. The Falcons are winning games. How serious should we take this Atlanta team, Alex?
I'll take Atlanta as serious, even though we did pick them to win this division. But I'll take them as serious as the offensive coordinator, or rather the coaching staff, decides to run Bijan Robinson. You drafted this kid number 7, 8, 9, I can't even remember, last year, and you have yet to utilize him to his full potential. I still, to this day, if I cannot recall, I don't know what his big game is. He hasn't given us that 150-yard, that what we saw from a Saquon or a Todd Gurley, a guy that had the ilk of what this guy had coming into this league. He had 13 carries. 13. If you're not going to use this guy, then you really truly wasted a pick, and you could have just stayed with Tyler Algier, which is what I said they should do, and go after a pass rusher, but I digress. You should have just stayed with Tyler Algier, who was a 1,000-yard rusher in your offense already. He and Bijan Robinson tied for, basically one carry apart from each other. That doesn't make any sense. You need a dominating performance and punish the opposing defense into the dirt. I need to see that. Kirk Cousins, I had no doubt that Kirk Cousins was going to come in and stabilize this team. He's doing exactly what I thought he would do. But you're not punishing teams the way that I thought you would be able to punish teams. And Kyle Pitts, it's nice of you to show up on, National Tight End Day. Actually, all the tight ends seem to show up on that day. But, Kyle Pitts, 4 catches, 91 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Nice of you to join the fray, and your other compadres in Darryl Mooney and Drake London, and, being a part of this offense, because he's just been terrible from a fantasy standpoint and on the actual field themselves. But I need to see something from Atlanta to really have me think that they can even do any damage, because I think they have a really good team, and I think their defense is an opportunistic defense that they can probably maybe even win a game in the playoffs. But right now, until they decide to really take this running game and punish the way that we've seen, we're not going to talk about this game, but the way that we've seen that Lions do to teams, I think Atlanta's playing with their food as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and let's be fair, Alex, I don't think anybody is built like Detroit to do that, exactly what you're talking about, that punishing style. Nobody has an O-line like these guys. I talked about it last week. I said this O-line is entering a different conversation. Forget being the best O-line in football. I think we're looking at an offensive line that might be the best in maybe 10 years. We're talking about an O-line that the last time that I could even think of an O-line that was in this conversation was that Cowboys O-line years ago with a young Dak Prescott and a young Zeke Elliott, when they had Zach Martin and those guys. That was really the last time I remember an O-line being this dominant. So to be fair to Atlanta, I don't think they're built quite like that, but I get your point. I would love to see Bijan Robinson become a more focal point of the offense and bring a little more balance to your point. This guy was taken in a top 10 pick. He was viewed as one of the best running back prospects we've seen in the last 5-8 years, and he just isn't being utilized enough. So I would like to see that. I think these wins against Tampa Bay are just huge, though. Those wins right now are really the difference between these two teams, because Tampa Bay is a pretty good football team. I really think they are, but those wins have been so big, and I'll be really curious to see if Kirk Cousins and this team can make some noise. I don't think they're necessarily a contender, but I think they're a team to watch here in the second half of the season. Now, you mentioned the Lions. I know it was the Titans, and I know this team's not very good, but I think the Lions might be the best team in the NFL right now. They were dominant in this game. So much balance on this offense. Ben Johnson is pulling all the right strings. I just mentioned the O-line. The protection that Goff gets, he's been so accurate. This offense has playmakers at multiple positions. They've got receivers, the running game, the tight end, and the defense really is way better than what we saw from the last 2 years. This is starting to look like a very, very complete football team.
Interesting. Jared Goff, when have we seen now? Jared Goff is throwing the ball about 18 times a game, not even getting to 20, 18 times. They're doubling down on the rushing, even though Montgomery got hurt, he did come back into the game, but they're really doubling down on what they're on the running game. Now, one of the things I spoke about, what was it, about maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, Brad, I mentioned the fact that if Jameson Williams can start to string some things together, this team will be really, truly dangerous. However, he has now been suspended for PEDs, and as I saw today, there's a gun charge out there that there's a bench warrant that's out for him now. So those 4 games may get into longer depending on what comes out after this. So as they are matriculating through the season, I expect them to win that division. I expect them to go to the playoffs. However, Jameson Williams is a factor in being able to stretch that field. And if you don't have a guy like that, I know you have the running game, but when you start to perhaps get into these playoffs and you face better teams, better coaches, they're going to be able to do some things that's going to force your quarterback to make plays when the running game gets slowed down a little bit. And I think that could possibly be a big missing piece, but I am projecting out. But as of what you said right now, Brett, I have to agree that offensive line, they're going to be scary as they head into the postseasons. But again, I want to just bring this up now. Jameson Williams could possibly be missing more games outside of the 4 that he's already been suspended for.
Yeah, it's a good point, Alex. I think him and Aiden Hutchinson are kind of those 2 big playmakers on opposite sides of the ball, obviously, that could really affect this team as far as its legit Super Bowl chances here. And with the trade deadline looming here, that's going to be a team to really watch, because I think they know they have a real shot at a title right now. And I want to know, how aggressive is this ownership and management group going to get as far as trying to strike while the iron's hot? And maybe you move some draft capital and you go after a wide receiver, a pass rusher, and try to really fill in some of those holes. That's going to be fascinating to see what they do there. Sunday, I think we saw some teams where the season really got away from them. I think the Bengals and the Jets, like I mentioned earlier, I think their seasons are virtually over. Those were devastating losses. They got absolutely smoked by Philadelphia. And I thought this was a game that maybe Cincy could come in, get a win, stay alive, and maybe even try to put a run together. But it just feels like that slow start, and they just haven't been able to get it going. That defense is terrible. Joe Burrow can only do so much. But this was probably the most impressive win by Philly. Now, granted, I don't think their defense is very good, but how much do you trust the Eagles at this point? Because they're a little bit better than I thought they would be at this point. I know we weren't super high on them. I don't think either one of us thought they'd be terrible. We picked them to win this division. But what are your thoughts on the Eagles going forward? How much do you trust this team?
I don't. I'm not a believer in the Eagles. I went back and looked at probably the last 3 weeks, and, I saw it from one of the guys at NFL Films. So I went back and looked at he is truly missing a lot of easy plays. It's not the same offense. It's nervous when he's up there. He doesn't feel as confident as he was 2 years ago. It doesn't feel like he has a grasp of the offense. Now, what I will say is I do understand that, that coach, he's just a sitting duck, regardless of what happens this year. Even if they go to the NFC Championship game, I still think he's gone. Barring, like you said, I think you said a week ago, barring a Super Bowl appearance, I think he's gone. So I think there's just so much disruption in that locker room that it's eventually going to spill out onto the field. Some of the stuff I talked about last year when they were 9-1 or 10-1, and they all thought they were you could clearly see this was not a good team. And right now, looking at it, this is not a good team. Still not a good team. They have a lot of name power, but what is the difference between what they had with DeAndre Swift last year and bringing in Saquon Barkley? Does this team look better than they did last year? I don't think so.
Pittsburgh Steelers, Alex. This is another team that I think people would call one of the surprise teams in the NFL. They moved to 6-2. Russ has been pretty sharp here. Now, he took over for the starting job, as we know, for Justin Fields. A lot of people questioned that move because this offense has really come to life and started to attack down the field. The passing game just never really got where it needed to be with Fields. Now, he was able to make some plays with his athleticism, but they weren't consistent enough. Now we're starting to see this team look like more of a complete football team. What's the ceiling for the Steelers this year?
In our preseason pick'em, I did have the Steelers. I said they should go 6-2, and that's exactly where they are at this current point now. When I saw, like you mentioned in pre-production, I did kind of back off when I saw how horrendous that preseason looked. But I'm one that wasn't surprised. I always thought they should go to Russ at some point in time once he was quote unquote healthy. But and I know people say, "Oh, they're playing." No, they were winning off of the defense. And shout out to probably he's looking like the betting odds favorite to be defensive player of the year again, and TJ Watt. Because he literally lost them the 2 games they lost. Justin Fields did. If you look at the tape, he lost those games. It was his fault with bad quarterback play. Plain and simple. So there wasn't a moment that I thought they wouldn't go to him. Now, what I will say is, one of the things I did notice, and when I was looking at, someone had asked me to take a look at what would the numbers be if they wanted to keep Fields, and what if they wanted to keep Russ and let the other go. So I did take a look at that. If Justin Fields plays 51%, I believe it's 51 or 60% of the starting snaps at quarterback, that 4 that they traded, or whatever that pick was, I believe it was a 5th round that they traded, or a 6th round that they traded, becomes a 5th or 4th. I apologize for not having it in front of me. That's also a factor. I'm not going to sit there and just say he was trash and didn't do a lot of things, but that's also probably a factor in the deciding matter why they made the switch as well, even if they were already going to go to him. So I keep that in mind. But I think Russ, but just managing the game and not making bad decisions. And like I said, when he came to this team, Mike Tomlin is a player-friendly coach, similar to Pete Carroll. He's a guy that can be a buffer in between, and it's shown, as some of the players have talked about. They heard the things about Russ, but they haven't experienced them. Russ has been more in tune with the team, with the players. And just from my eyes watching the game, he is also talking to Justin Fields after every single offensive series, whether it be good or bad. He goes and he has a conversation with Justin Fields and has the iPad in front of both of them, showing what he did right or perhaps what he did wrong or what he should have done different here and there. So I have to give him credit from what I'm seeing from Russ. And thank God they're also finally using Donnell Washington, the 6'8" freak tight end that they refused to use for the past year and a half until Russ got into the game.
Did you know that Pint Glass Football is more than just this podcast? We have an exclusive newsletter. Sign up for free at pintglassfootball.com to receive articles and insights delivered straight to your inbox. But wait, there's more. We're excited to announce our brand new YouTube channel. Not only can you listen to our podcast on YouTube, but you'll also find exclusive video content waiting for you. So hit the pause button right now and go subscribe to our newsletter, and hit that subscribe button on YouTube to stay connected with the latest football news and our exclusive content. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. We personally love the pick'em game. Just pick between 2 and 5 players to build a pick'em entry. Pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for a chance to win big. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Download the Underdog Fantasy app and sign up today with promo code PGF. That's promo code PGF to claim your special pick plus first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. The official ticketing app of Pint Glass Football is now SeatGeek. I can't recommend them enough, guys. I've been using SeatGeek for years. You want to go to a game this season? SeatGeek is here to take the confusion out of buying tickets, making sure you get the best seats at the best prices. With SeatGeek, you'll never have to worry about overpaying for tickets again. How? They put a 0 to 10 score on each ticket, so you know you're getting a good deal. But here's the real game changer. You can get $20 off your first ticket purchase with the code PGFPOD. That's right, $20 off with code PGFPOD. This season, make every game day epic with SeatGeek. Download the SeatGeek app and remember to enter the code PGFPOD to grab your $20 discount. Alex, the college football playoff is starting to take focus here. I think it's time to look at these teams, look and see where we are and what teams are going to make this thing. Alex, let's start with the current number one team in the country, Oregon Ducks. They're 8-0. A lot of people are picking them to win the Big Ten. All the analytics and percentages, whatever you want to take that with a grain of salt. They have Oregon as the favorite now to win the Big Ten. Obviously, they had that huge win over Ohio State a couple weeks ago, but they quietly destroyed a number 20 ranked Illinois team at home, a game that I was actually at. Really, really cool, Alex. I was able to get credentials to this game and see this game up close and from the press box. This team is really starting to play like a number one team in the country. And I'm not saying that they are going to stay there. And I think there's certainly some teams that could possibly knock them off. But the speed, athleticism, I was so impressed by this team in person and just how easy they made it look versus what I think is a very good Illinois team. They looked like they didn't even belong on the same field. And that 38-9 score doesn't even tell you how lopsided this game actually was because they really took their foot off the gas. This could have been an absolute demolishing if Oregon wanted to. I was so impressed with them. Do they win the Big Ten and do they stay the number one seed going into the playoffs?
Yes, I still have them. I have them as the number one seed. Yeah, they don't really have anything tough coming up. I mean, people think Michigan is, but Michigan, they don't know whether they're coming or going. They could put me or you at quarterback. Me or you at quarterback right now would be better. So sorry, worlds and those Michigan lovers, but it is what it is. But it will come down. I'm going to assume. What do you think between them and Ohio State in the Big Ten championship?
Yeah, I think it really is those two. I think they're the clear-cut two teams. No, I'm not taking a shot at Penn State. They've been very good, don't get me wrong. But I think right now those two teams look like the two best teams. And I think at this point, after what we saw in that game a couple weeks ago between these two teams and how evenly matched they looked, let's say hypothetically they both make it to the Big Ten championship game. Let's say Ohio State wins the rematch. I think it's safe to say both these teams are getting in. One's going to get the auto bid and one's going to be an at-large at this point.
Yeah. I'm if they'll both get in, I still will take them in the championship game. I will take Oregon to get in, but that doesn't do anything to, as far as I'm concerned, to where Michigan, if they continue on the path that they're on, to make it as well into the playoffs. So I don't think they'll have any real issue getting in either, whether they win or lose the game. So I agree with you. They both will get in, but I will say this. We're saying that now, but we know what game Ohio State has coming up this weekend against Penn State. We'll talk about it more on the pregame pod in a few days, but they still have to face Penn State this weekend, and then they have number 13 Indiana, surprising Indiana, right before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, there's definitely some potential landmines to get through. To your point, Oregon going to Michigan on Saturday, probably their toughest game they're going to face, but I think on paper, I like Oregon in that game. I think them playing on the road in Wisconsin, November 16th, potentially could be a snowy, cold atmosphere. We know how Wisconsin gets that time of the year. So that might be a game to circle as maybe a possible upset. But I think they're going to be favored in all those games. And I think, like we talked about with Ohio State, it's really going to come down to those two teams, I think, in that really good Big Ten this year. Now, look, I think Georgia is still a team to watch here. They're not in first place, but I think there's really a pathway here for Georgia to not just get to the SEC title game, probably with the tiebreakers. I mean, it's going to get kind of complicated in the SEC, but I don't think, sorry, Alex, I don't think they're going to have any issue with Florida. So I think this is a team that right now, even at 6-1, I think they're really, really dangerous. And I think they could be a team that's maybe in the 2 seed here when it's all said and done.
Wow, you think Georgia can get to the 2 seed?
I think they could win this conference. Now, look, I picked Texas to win this conference. I'm not saying they won't, but after that impressive win over Texas recently that we saw, it's got me a little more hesitant. And look, we won't jump into the game too much here, but Texas also looked a little shaky against Vanderbilt. I'm not feeling as good about them as I was a couple weeks ago, and I'm starting to think this Bulldogs team might be the team to circle once again.
Yeah, I think, well, you never count Georgia out, just like a lot of people count Alabama. I'm not counting them out either, but Carson Beck he's not the quarterback people thought he was coming into this season.
That's a fact.
In big games, he does not look good. He does not look poised to something that we pointed out, with a few other quarterbacks. I think he's going to be an issue in big games, and they're going to have some issues when it comes to facing any one of these top teams, even though I know they're currently right there at number 2 overall. But I think they're going to have some problems coming up. And now we talk about Florida. They're at home, but then there's that Ole Miss, and they're at Ole Miss. So that's going to be interesting. And then there's Tennessee, who's been up and down, and Nico has had an up and down, but he's still a player. So these next 3 games, by the time they get to end their season with Massachusetts and Georgia Tech, we'll know where they are before Thanksgiving. We'll know what this team is going into the final stretch.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think Carson Beck was a guy, as far as from the NFL draft angle, I think a lot of us, myself included here, I think we thought he was going to take a big step forward this year as far as his development, and he hasn't really done that. He makes as many good plays as he does bad plays. You'll see the wow throws. You'll see the NFL throws, the tight window throws, the plays that make you go, okay, I see it. But then at the same time, he'll throw an ugly pick. He tried to give that game away against Texas with multiple interceptions. It's just that Georgia defense was not going to let it happen. Certainly a guy that, as good as Georgia is as a team, he's a guy that could give a game away in a big moment, no doubt about it. What about the ACC, Alex? Miami is 8-0. I've been saying for a while now, I said it recently on the spot, I think they're a fraud, though. I'm not buying into this team. I'm not. I know that they keep winning games. I love Cam Ward. I've been talking about this kid all the way back since he was playing at Washington State and nobody was paying attention. But this team is just so up and down, and it feels like this guy has to carry them week in and week out. They've had some lucky breaks. I don't think they're as good as their record. I don't think they're as good as their rank. I think Clemson is a team to watch out for in the ACC. I don't think both these teams get in. A lot of people are projecting both of them. I'm not sure about that. I think if they meet in the ACC title game, I'm taking Clemson. But what are your thoughts on Miami?
Well, I'm a Cam Moore guy, the grit and everything that he has. I'm gonna take Miami to make it. In that sense, if like you said, it comes down to them and Clemson, I'm gonna take them for the win. I'm just not high. I know Clemson's kind of snuck up on us, I guess, if you want to say in that sense. I'm just simply not that high on Clemson as much as everyone else is. I think there's a lot of holes in their game. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of holes in that defensive Miami and defensively for Miami as well. Let me ask you a question. What would be Clemson's signature win this year?
See, that's just it, Alex. When we look at these teams in the ACC, there's not a whole lot of signature wins. I think you've got to win this conference to get in. I don't think 2 teams are getting in, even though I've seen multiple media outlets saying that both of those teams could get in. I just don't see it. I think it's win and you're in, and lose and you're out.
Trust me, I'm not disagreeing with you at all on terms of what, both of them getting in. I believe it truly will only be one of these teams that gets in, barring nobody else falters along the way, that where it wouldn't matter who won, that both of them still get in. But that first loss by Clemson is just horrible. And, that's their one big game. I know. But on the other side, I have to be fair and keep the same energy. Miami really doesn't have a ranked team that they're going to play for the entire year.
Now, BYU 8-0. I think they've been one of the most surprising teams in college football. I can't figure out the Big 12. I'm not even going to pretend like I can figure out this league. It feels wide open, even though they're undefeated. I think there's a chance that they get knocked off at some point. So now, look, they looked really impressive. UCF in week 8, and they ended up beating them up. And really, the score wasn't even a good indicator of how good BYU is in that game. But at the same time, I don't think anybody out of the Big 12 makes any real noise, and I definitely don't think 2 teams from that conference get in. I just don't see it. I think one team gets in, and it's whoever wins that conference. Maybe it's BYU at this point because of the record, but I don't even know what to make of that league, Alex. It's just so crazy over there right now. And I know you mentioned it in pre-production. Hats off to Colorado. I know they're probably going to be on the outside looking in, but what a job that Deion Sanders has done with this program. 6-2 in the top 25, playing some really good football.
Well, not so fast there, because there is a Big 12 championship game that needs to be played. And if they can find their way into that some way, shape, or form, unless you have some Colorado lost in a 3-point game to Kansas State, a game that, if I'm not mistaken, we talked about, they probably should have had a chance to win that game, if not for some silly plays. So there's Iowa State, and then there's Kansas State, and then there's Colorado. And the only 2 undefeateds are BYU and Iowa State. If everybody wins out, so I'm not sure how that would work exactly for Colorado to even find themselves in the Big 12 championship. But however, if they find themselves in the big championship game, based upon what I saw them do with Kansas State, and I'm not a believer in BYU at all anyway, I'm gonna maybe push some chips to the table, even though I am the person that said I only see Colorado winning 5 games. But I have to say that the Colorado defense, it's the defense that's really been the difference, because Travis and Shador are doing what they always do, but it's really been the new defensive coordinator coming into Colorado, and what Robert Livingston has done. I think it's the defense that's really truly been the difference. Not necessarily the offense, because I believe the offense is doing what they've always done. It's the defense that's been different this year.
Now, I think we're only going to see one group of 5 team make this playoff. I think we've kind of known that all year. It's going to be the highest ranked team. And right now that looks like Boise State. Boise State's probably going to end up with that 12 seed in this playoff. They're 6-1 right now. Best running back in the country. Ashton Jeanty, we've talked about this guy. He's a legitimate Heisman Trophy candidate. Look, he had an off game last week with only 128 yards rushing. I'm obviously kidding aside here, but it really was his worst game of the year. That's how good this guy's been. Their only loss was a close loss on the road to Oregon, who's currently the number 1 team in the country. So that's how good this team has been. I think Boise State could be a really fascinating story going into this playoff here. I'm not saying they're a title contender, but they might just be good enough to sneak up and knock somebody off in this playoff. Now, I think to round out the playoff, we talked about it. I think Clemson, look, I think they win the ACC. I think Miami gets bounced. And I think that opens the door for maybe another Big Ten team, maybe another SEC team, a team like Texas A&M, who's 7-1 right now. I think maybe a team like Tennessee. One of those teams, I think, sneaks in here once Miami falls off, or Clemson for that matter, because I don't think they're both getting in. But Texas, they're probably looking at an at-large at this point. Even though I picked them to win this conference, and theoretically they still could, I just am starting to lose a little bit of faith in them to actually pull it off. What are your thoughts on the Texas teams? Texas A&M, we've talked about them. What a job that Elko has done there in year 1. I mean, my goodness, he has turned this program around so quick. What a home run hire that's been. But let's start with Texas, though. What are your thoughts on Texas here? Like, how much confidence do you have in them, not only to finish out in this conference, but just in the playoff picture in general? How much noise can they make?
I think they can make a lot of noise, and as you know, I had a hot take within the last weeks, in the last 2 weeks, and I'm standing by that. Going into this postseason or right before the end of the season, Arch Manning will be the starter. So that's where my confidence is coming from, that Arch Manning is going to be starting, and this will be a team that will start to roll. And because with that kid and what I don't know, I'm sorry, Quinn Ewers, I'm sorry, I'm benching you. If I'm the coach this year, this is about me and getting this school a national championship. And from my perspective, Arch Manning is the one that can get it there. Either way, even if they don't, a quick leash a la Hurts and Tua in that championship game. I have a quick leash from this point on with this quarterback. You cannot, I will not allow you to mess anything up, because he is a gunslinger, which I like for him in the NFL, but I do not like for him on this team going forward to try and win a championship. I have a quick hook, as they say in pitching, the minute I see something I don't like. So that's the reason I'm going with Texas, and I think they're going to look 10 times better once Arch Manning is at the helm.
Yeah, I told you guys this a couple weeks ago. You got to stick around to the end of these podcasts because that's when some of the best hot takes come out. And you've been on this hot take with Arch Manning. Could you imagine if Arch Manning takes over this team, Texas gets hot, wins the whole thing? Could you imagine the hype going in
that would be
next season?
Crazy. But Brad, we're about to close out. But I have one question for you. Just looking at the top 12. So right now, just looking at it where it is right now, Iowa State and Clemson are tied at 11 technically. So that would be your 11-12. But let's look at the bottom 4 of that. Let's take Clemson out because you say they're going to win, so they're in, right? What do you think about Indiana, Alabama? One of those teams, can one of those teams sneak in? I know you're going to say if Alabama wins the SEC championship game, but let's just say they don't get to that and it ends up being Georgia and Texas. But what if Alabama wins out and what if Indiana wins out? Can you see one of those two teams sneaking into the top 12?
So Indiana is currently undefeated. So if they win out, they're winning the Big Ten, obviously. I don't think Indiana will win out. I think even if they get to the Big Ten title, I don't like their chances against an Ohio State or an Oregon. But it becomes really interesting because if Indiana makes it to a Big Ten title game and loses, and they're a one-loss Big Ten runner-up, are they getting left out of this playoff? I'm going to say no.
And that's key because their last 3 games are against Michigan, at Ohio State, and then Purdue. So they could possibly have one loss prior to that if we believe Ohio State is who they say they are.
Yeah, and I said it going into the year. I thought that the Big Ten could realistically get 4 teams into the playoff. I thought the SEC could get 4 teams in the playoff. It certainly could be that way. And I think we could be looking at Oregon, Ohio State, and then a Penn State and Indiana as at-large. Well, I guess 3 of those teams would be at-large at that point coming out of that conference. I think it's a very realistic possibility. And Indiana's been absolutely one of the biggest surprises in college football. Don't think they can win the Big Ten title, but I think they can get into the playoff. And, man, what a Cinderella story that would be. If you enjoy the podcast, do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Once again, I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Pint Glass Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast.
Zencastr is the ultimate web-based podcasting solution. It provides high-quality audio and video podcast production and hosting. With a full suite of professional tools, podcasters can seamlessly record, produce, and publish studio-quality content all from one dashboard. Zencastr's post-production process takes the headache out of audio production. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. Coordinating all your guests to record in person is painful and tedious. Easily invite up to 11 participants per recording with one click. Go to Zencastr.com/pricing and use my code PGFP and you'll get 30% off your first 3 months of Zencastr Professional. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.